property dualism, the view that not that you are a soul and body, but that you have these conscious properties and these you have consciousness and you can experience the world, and these features of our minds are distinct from our brains or our bodies, and they're to be taken seriously. But there's other views on offer, some that even reject that, called eliminativism or illusionism or fictionism or um, reductionism, where conscious properties are just reducible to brain states themselves. And these have been quite popular in recent history. And now we're seeing a renewed interest in what some would consider an older view called panpsychism, the idea that from that there are both mental and physical properties, and at its base, it's not always entirely clear what it is at its base, but nonetheless, there are these mental and physical properties, and all of reality is somehow um, mental or has um, mental properties or is proto-mental or something of the sort. This sort of view is becoming far more popular and far more of interest in um, popular discourse, as well as in a broader um, discussions about the mind and the brain, neuroscience, and it's been something of a hot topic as of late. And if you're familiar with the discussion, you can just peruse it. You'll find that as there are discussions of physicalism, um, and physicalism is kind of going out of popularity, uh, and we're seeing this renewed interest in what's considered an older view called panpsychism or something of the sort, going back to Bertrand Russell. This idea that there was this sort of underlying substance of mental properties and physical properties or brain properties, neural properties, and we don't know really what it is. But nonetheless, it seems to be the best explanation of the fact that we have these two distinct types of properties in the world, where consciousness really is unique in the world and radically different, say, than the publicly observable properties of brain states. But nonetheless, they are somehow at a deeper ontological level united or one. Say, rather than a sort of substantial dualism that holds at a deep level that there are two types of things. So this has become far more popular and has become popularized by the likes of um, in recent history the really atheistic and secularist philosophers who still buy into what's called naturalism. Naturalism, the view that there are that the universe itself is somehow causally closed, and that explanations are of even mental states or consciousness states are explained by way of physical mechanisms or physical events themselves, um, and so fully explained by or within nature itself as a closed causal system. And as people are taking consciousness more and more seriously, once again, we're seeing this interest in something like Bertrand Russell's view or some version of panpsychism that's out there that seems to be, over time, really replacing the kind of materialism or physicalism that's on offer and has been kind of the ruling paradigm, you might say, of the day in mind-brain discussions from philosophers and scientists of the day. But as people realize more and more that it just doesn't have the resources, it's just simply inadequate to make sense of consciousness itself, people are turning toward an alternative. And rather than turn toward sort of this even older idea that we are souls of some sort that could exist disembodied or exist in the afterlife, Um, it's kind of a wacky idea itself, right? Whether that's perception, it's a misfit. But rather than that, they're moving toward this more Russellian monism, or what some philosophers would call neutral monism, or even distinct, and there's lots of varieties, which you would call panpsychism. And that's becoming the sort of dominant paradigm now, because as it's been made popularized by people like Thomas Nagel, to some extent, the famous philosopher David Chalmers, and now even more so, the kind of contemporary proponent of the view, Philip Goff, who has gotten a lot of attention, funding, and all sorts of things. This sort of view still stands within a kind of broader tradition of secularism, whereby theism has very little place or role to play in providing some sort of explanatory framework for consciousness and mind-brain relations. And so rather than go back to, again, this antiquated notion of the soul that was more prominent throughout history and more popular throughout history, many are moving in this direction because it still saves them a kind of naturalistic framework where everything can be, at least in theory, explained in this way without invoking a god or without invoking theism. And so that's the sort of trend right now. And unfortunately, that's the trend. And you can see it all over the place. I mean, if you look at Philip Goff and the kind of recent successes he's had and his friends who are doing similar work, it's quite clear that funding is being placed here along these lines. But also, I mean, you could just peruse various sources, the John Templeton Foundation, as well as others that are putting a lot behind this. But even if you look at the Scientific American, where Scientific American has been for its history kind of the bastion of scientific naturalistic materialism, it too has begun to, at least it seems, recognize the cracks or the problems within its own sort of materialistic paradigm. And so we've started to see more and more openness, certainly not to theism. And yeah, I mean, that would be a complete misfit and out of place, certainly an unwelcome guest. And not even really to the soul idea or to dualism or substance dualism, but rather to this sort of panpsychist notion.